Okay, hello. I think we're technically ready to get started. Happy to see that actually some of you found the way into this room, and there seems to be an interest for the topic of standards. That was not always the case. So, welcome all of you to this panel session about standards fit for the future, knowing which standards matter and why you should care. Today, Katka, Balázs, István, and I were here on behalf of the Gala Standards Initiative. It's an initiative that tries to compile information on standards for you, for members, to navigate the standards, sometimes jungle, or the standards scene, and make sense out of this for you. And we also want to keep you updated on relevant changes in the standardization area. And let me start with an anecdote. Well, if you ask around, everybody knows about standards, right? Who hasn't heard about standards? Well, let me ask a question. Who loves standards? Hands up, please. Oh, I share the excitement sometimes. Why are you here? I hope we can change that around at least a bit. So a lot of people say they know about standards, but when you really start talking to people, they sometimes have a bit of a superficial knowledge. They know some standards. And when I myself came to the industry about 20 years back, the first standards that crossed my path were the technical standards like TMX, TBX, XLIF, and this kind of stuff. And I got a bit of excited. Oh, cool, there is like interoperability, exchange standards and that. And once I started working with these, I got a bit disillusioned pretty fast and thought, oh, maybe, good idea, but not like really very practical. So, and then a couple of years later, I founded a company together with a colleague, and he was an auditor for the EN 15038 standard, yeah? And he said, hey, it's important, and Daniel, we need to do the auditing, and it's going to really take off, and the future, and blah, blah. Fast forward 3 years later, we parted ways, and it never took off. It was only with ISO 17100 that the standardization, at least in my perception, gained some more traction, let's say, and also because finally also some people on the client side understood the value of standards, and then sometimes even forced their buyers and suppliers to get certified for example 17100. But since then, a lot has been happening. And even myself, I understood the value of standards. And you know, today there are like certification standards and these kind of guidance standards that give you some orientation on how you can do things. And in my opinion, they are a lot more practical today than they have been sometimes in the past. And what we want to do today with you is we want to give you some updates on two areas of standards that we think are important or of importance, especially in the era of AI. And that is one, everything related to information security and data privacy, hot topic, I would say. And in a world where we can quickly generate all sorts of content translations, localizations, also the standards relating to quality, they are pretty important. And our panel is divided into two parts. The first one is on that information security and data privacy part, and it's going to be started by Balázs. And the second part on quality is then presented by Katka. And we invite you all to ask your questions, practical questions, why you did not yet fall in love with standards, and what probably maybe you also should do related to standards, how you should prepare for certification. Whatever questions you have, we have people here to answer this who went through the pain sometimes, but who are also active members in developing these standards. So fire away.
Thank you.
Up to you.
So, that seems to work. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone, for being here. So, really, the topic of being compliant with things, having management systems, and being audited, that is not very exciting. And I'm pretty sure that there are a couple of us, including myself in this room, who found this out the hard way. So my name is Balázs Kis. I work for a technology company, which is, you could argue it's very different from a translation company or another kind of company whose main activity is in technology, but I don't think that's really true. What is true that we might not love standards, being compliant with things, but we definitely like and we definitely need to get new clients. And one part of the reality that we as a company have been facing over the last couple of years, that as we are selling our product to companies in regulated industries, we started talking to companies that are thousands, tens of thousands of times larger than us in terms of revenues, in terms of organization size, in terms of organization complexity, if you count the reporting levels in the organization. And the reality in the language industry, most of the companies present here are, at least by investment or American standards, small and medium-sized enterprises who need to talk to the large corporations that exist in life sciences, in finance, we have very, very special niche that we often sell to is gaming, but they are also, for a different reason, very conscious of rules being followed. And that led to, and this coincided in our company life, at least, it's coincided with the introduction of GDPR. We operate in the EU, like we said, how many was it? 58% of the participants are from Europe, not necessarily from the EU. They didn't count that, but a lot of us are, or a lot of us are operating in the EU, or have clients in the EU, or have contractors in the EU, or employees in the EU. So GDPR applies to most of us. Or if it doesn't, there are other privacy regulations around the world that might. So this coincidence led us to look at compliance as an area. I mean, it turned out that was completely by, I wouldn't say accident, but I was one of those executives at the companies, a few executives who didn't run the other way when they saw bureaucracy and regulations and whatever. That we discovered that compliance is indeed an area, a profession that exists and that can be practiced, and it is not the same as law. So I'm not talking about the legal framework, the contractual frameworks, anything that has to do with civil law or IP law or whatever, but the borderline between legal and standards. And I will tell you in a moment how data privacy comes in the picture. So because I started dealing with compliance, there's this thing that I was mocked for being this long, but there's a label I snuck in from another conference. I've been to, there's a compliance conference I go to every year since 2019. That was in Amsterdam a month ago, and I was given this label because I have an American compliance certification, which doesn't have anything to do with legal stuff. Like 70% of compliance professionals are lawyers indeed, but not all of them are. So I'm an engineer by profession. So again, back to this. You might not love standards, you might not love being compliant, but you need to talk to customers that are thousands of times larger than you and who will expect you to follow their compliance framework. And they are often required to follow a certain compliance program because of their size, because of the industry they are operating in, and this thing kind of trickles down, hence the image where you see water drops of water trickling down from leaves. So some aspects of those compliance programs will hit us hard. And these companies will also offset accountability. Also, anyone who is running a compliance program, if you look at GDPR, if you look at any information security standards, they will also often talk about third-party compliance. So you don't only have to be compliant within your organization, you also need to make sure that your suppliers, your employees are compliant. And you need to be able to prove that. And that's a challenge. So we are not talking about all the things that we have to comply with, but some things that became trendy and became general requirements are these. So it's whenever we, and probably you, think of submitting an application to an RFP, an offer to an RFP, or sign up a larger client, they will ask you, okay, what kind of information security standards are you certified by? Okay, none. Yeah, here's this questionnaire with 1,000 questions. Please have them filled in the next 2 days. They will also hit you with, or ask you for the same thing or almost the same thing, because they also need to be compliant with the privacy regulations. You will probably be hit by a data processing agreement or a similar thing that reflects their preference of pushing all the responsibility to you, to the supplier. And there's one thing you need to know about American companies, and that was created following the banking scandal in 2008. And that's when an American company above a certain size, I don't exactly know the numbers here, has a so-called effective compliance program that has this and this and this and this element. Their executives can actually escape a prison term, even if the company is found guilty of certain economic crimes. And this is why the most comprehensive description of an effective compliance program that is followed by most international companies across the world is described in a document called the Department of Justice Sentencing Guide. That's part of the criminal law, actually part of the regulation that surrounds criminal law in the United States. That's so the DOJ Sentencing Guidelines, Chapter 8, is actually the Bible for compliance professionals, because that's the most detailed description of what a compliance program looks like when an executive of an American company can escape a prison sentence when an economic crime is proven to be perpetrated by the company. So this is why it comes to here. I want this to sit in the back in your minds, because most of the things that we will talk about, and not too long, is information security standards and data protection and privacy laws, which are very, very tightly intertwined. So there are two information security standards. There are actually several, but there are two that are most often required. So in Europe, you get along with, or get away with complying with ISO 27001. But if you ever dream of selling anything technology related, anything using technology to North America, not just the United States. So we have Canadian banks demanding SOC 2 of us. We have Canadian government or agencies demanding SOC 2 of us. SOC 2 is from North America, and it's kind of a byproduct of an accounting standard, because it's the American Association of the Chartered Accountants that created that standard. And with the ISO standard, you go to an auditor that you would go to with a quality standard. We go to TÜV Süd, for instance. But with SOC 2, you go to a big auditing firm because it is a byproduct of an accounting standard. So with SOC 2, we are working together, among others, we're working together with KPMG, one of the big four. it is not easy. Because to comply with both standards, you need to build up a so-called information security management system, which, again, like all compliance program, at first glance, it would require an organization that is beyond our sizes. So we have between 100 and 200 people, with one chief information security officer, one chief compliance officer, and this is, if you want to comply every letter, so ISO 27001 has several ancillary standards that describe the controls that do the that tell you how to build this up. And many times you will feel that this is beyond your organization. So one of the clever things you need to do is to cut back in a way that you still comply with the standards, but your organization remains able to function. And this is a trade-off, and even more so with SOC 2. And they are not easy to gain compliance with. It's not necessarily the building up of the information security management system, but to prepare for an audit. For SOC 2, you cannot even get, it's not an audit, it's called a report, but the only report that clients usually accept in North America is one that follows a 6-month monitoring period. So you don't only need to prove that you have all the controls in place, you need to prove that you operate according to the controls. So, and this is an order of magnitude more difficult than with ISO 27001. There's a logic. I don't want to go into details here, especially not because my colleague Adam will have an information security workshop starting at 2. Sorry about advertising that, but this is how I can escape going into the details here. And this is intertwined with data protection and privacy. And with that, this is not optional. You need to comply with it. If you're affected, if you touch any personal detail of an EU citizen. That's about GDPR. But I didn't bring up the UK privacy laws. I didn't bring up HIPAA, which is kind of, I don't know if it was a model, but it's very similar to GDPR. And it was first. This is a data privacy regulation in America for healthcare. So it's not general. It's for healthcare, but it's very strict. And this is about knowing what data you process, knowing if you touch personal information when running your organization or in the content that you are processing. And language companies have a special situation here because we process content. But we run cloud systems where translation teams are processing content. So pretty much the same framework here, and you don't always know if personal information or sensitive personal information is included. But this is where it starts. You need to know what personal information you touch and how, and you need to build up the protection of this, because GDPR, if you strip away all the exceptions and the hundreds of pages, is just one sentence. Collecting and processing personal information is not allowed, period. And everything else in that regulation is an exception. And I'm saying that, and this is something that you can only find out the hard way. So you build up your compliance with it, but you don't always find the organization that would audit you without fining you. So most of the time you get an audit, will be done by a data protection authority, which has the power of fining you up to, I don't know, 4 million euro. So, 6 or 10% of your annual revenue, which is a lot. And again, if you're operating in Hungary, Hungary has one of the most vicious data protection authorities. So universities were fined like to stellar amounts. I know because my wife used to work for one that was fined. So again, I will share this, but we will be running out of time, so I will speed up. But I'm trying to set the landscape here. And like I said at the beginning, and I shouldn't repeat that, whenever you think of complying with GDPR, complying with one of the information security standards, you will be asked for proof that your suppliers and contractors also. And whenever you get all those questionnaires and audits from your clients, from your larger clients, they do it because they have to prove that you comply with their compliance program. So that's the trickle-down effect. And obviously, we all have blind spots, parts of the regulations and standards that we don't see, or we simply don't have the resources to comply with. Sometimes, and I'm saying that in a very, very separate, very private room, that sometimes executives decide to, okay, I'm going to take this risk because my company cannot take even to survey if we are fully compliant with the regulation. That is also plays in the decision whether to take a client or not, who requires certain level or are hitting with sensitive personal data. So, and this is when liability insurance comes in handy. There are all kinds of liability insurances available, and you need to. And when you look at a contract that your client slaps you with, they will include requirements that you need to have this and this and this and this liability insurance with this and this and this and this coverage. And one of the points where we negotiate these contracts and we are like is to cut back on the coverage, because sometimes the coverage of the liability insurance would be 100 times the business value that we make with that customer. And over to Katka, over back to Danielle. We are open for questions afterwards. Thank you.
I think it would be good for us. It's going to be me. It's not. Yeah, sorry about it. It would be good if you just stay there.
Okay.
And I would like to ask the audience a couple of questions. So, how many of you have an annual revenue of $5 million or euros or more? Like, please raise hands. Okay. So the majority of the companies here are small companies, right? How many of you have any certification for any information security standards? Hands up, please. Any experience that you would like to share from this? Was there anything that you found to be easy, smooth, or particularly irritating?
I would probably say one.
All right.
Which is actually very,
Please tell us.
I am Eva from Liechtenstein. I have an experience where we are lucky we have the ISO 27, whatever number is. And because also we work for quite a big clients, we have the experience, what is necessary. And then we got a client who is medium size. And you would expect that they know all this, they would have all these expectations in place, but we find out not. Because, for example, recently we're dealing with some documentation, right? And all these materials we would consider as confidential, so while they are still shared online, potentially in the cloud, whatever, there are really strict rules about the access.
Yep.
You would not share access for anyone with the link if we use the Google wording for that. And we find out they're not doing it. We so many times anyone could really access it. And we have a trouble to really explain them, hey guys, we're not going to do that. Our IS department is chasing us that this is not allowed. We can't do it. And we were in really the struggle with the client to explain them, hey guys, I believe you must have it. And later they change it. But we faced the opposite thing, that client was not requesting it. And we have to kind of push them and educate them, please do so. And it was even with regards to these basic GDPR things.
Thank you. I have really little to say to that, other than, yes, sometimes it's our task to educate the client. But we usually face this with suppliers who are required to comply, because we are required to comply. Klaus.
Yeah, Klaus from Kaleidoscope. I made an observation in the last year or two, and I'm wondering if somebody might confirm that. I found that at the large organization, the decision power has shifted away from the purchasing departments over to the compliance departments, which have the really nice benefit that price is not as important anymore. And you can actually price a lot of what they're asking for into the price that you actually sell for. I don't know if this is just us and we're lucky, but I really found that the purchasing people are gone. They're not in the picture. It's the compliance people that decide.
I partly concur. So we see a mix. But there are organizations where this is definitely true, where we have, despite having the certificates and whatever, we see an endless security audit, an ad hoc security audit by the security people, the compliance people there. This exists. In other parts, the procurement people are still there.
Balázs, I would have a question to you, which is relating to this industry. I mean, this industry by definition, our industry by definition, is an outsourcing industry that goes across the borders of the different countries. So like a lot of European companies, American companies work with Argentinians and others. How about this? Like, what is the best way? Do you have any hack for solving the data privacy requirements trans-border? Is there any advice that you can give to the room?
Well, a hack, I don't know if this is a hack, but there are two things that we started with, and that's more important than having the data processing agreements or the standard contractual clauses that are available in the EU websites. And that one of the things that you know what personal information you are letting through, and that's the other that is most important, that you do not accept to process. So you push some of the responsibility back because of the organization size doesn't allow us to control everything that goes through the content. You need to push back some of the information. So if you see that your client gave you a document with unredacted healthcare information, then you send it back to, please give it back to us redacted. Simply because there are technologies, including in Microsoft Azure, AI functionality from before GDP that can do named entity recognition of personal data, but because this is a regulation, any accuracy below 100% is unacceptable. And 100% is not a level of accuracy that any AI system would give you. So one of the things, push back cleverly and minimize the personal information that you touch. Be very mindful of the personal information that you touch. Yeah.
Yep.
We have a question there.
Sorry.
Naomi Bowman, DS Interpretation Inc. from USA. A couple of comments about 27001.
Yeah.
We're not certified. We're a small company, like many of the companies in this room, and the certification process for that is daunting and expensive. That doesn't mean you can't be compliant to the best of your ability. These standards, anybody can purchase them. You can purchase it. It's not expensive. I forget how much this one costs, but it's certainly under 200 Swiss franc. It might be under 100.
180, something like that.
Yeah. Buy it, read it, and have a plan, a data security, privacy plan in place. We work with a lot of Fortune 50 companies, and they require this. You don't have to be certified necessarily. Of course, that's the goal. But you can still be compliant, aware, and have a plan in place. There are templates. We bought a template. Ours is about 200 pages, our plan, and it meets all of HPE and Apple and Google and Facebook and PepsiCo and all of our clients' requirements for security.
RWS information security policies are published, for instance. Ours will be at some point, but we are still working on them. Yeah. But what is also important, and thank you very much, Naomi, for this, because you can be compliant without being certified. But the most important thing, you don't want to get caught losing data to bad actors and stuff like that. So even if you choose not to certify against it, you need to look at, and you don't have to do that formally, but you need to look at what might go wrong. And you look at the most impactful problems that can happen and protect yourselves against that.
Thank you very much, Naomi. Thank you very much, Balázs. Just to be able to keep the time, I would like to give the floor now to Katka. And if we have more time left in the end, we will ask some more questions.
So Nice morning to all of you. I'm short, so the mic is not for people like me, but we'll make it. We're inclusive. So I'm Katka, which is a nickname of Katerina. I've been in the industry for ages. You see it here. I'm a grandma in the industry. I'm not a physical grandma yet. I don't know what's good or bad, but grandma in the industry for sure. I've been here around since mid-90s. The majority of my life is connected with a company that doesn't exist anymore, which is Moravia. And, well, what to talk about? Quality. So it's not a boring topic, quality, definitely not. So why should we care? Because it's quality. Quality concept is actually omnipresent in whatever do we do, however we think. So we are constantly challenged somehow with the concept of quality. How are you today? Oh, the weather today is not what I've expected for Valencia. If you look out of the window, you might have expected 25, which is what I did, coming from almost a snowy Brno in the Czech Republic. Or the capacity of the lifts, elevators in this hotel, I don't know if it's satisfactory or not, because I always have to wait there for a couple of minutes till the elevator shows up. So all of those are questions about quality. Some elements in quality are just related to our own feelings and are very subjective. So how do I feel? What do I think about this? And it's fine if it's about weather. You cannot influence it. You just have to live with it. However, there is elements in quality that can be very annoying to you, especially if you have to pay for something. You buy something with a certain expectation. You interact with somebody, an institution, agency, a human, as a buyer, customer, requester, service provider relationship. You've got certain expectations, and you for sure are annoyed if those expectations aren't met. So, and I've been looking for a couple of quotes that would show us how complex the topic or the understanding of the concept of quality might be. It's not about just I see it and I love it or I hate it. Yes, that's the point of the saying that a customer is always right. And we have to be customer-centric, user-centric. Customer is who decides. For us, in the service industry, customers would typically be our clients, buyers of our services. We often tend to forget that buyers do have their own customers, internal or external, but still, customer is the boss. But where standards are important is the fact that quality does not come just from the air. It must be built into the whole process. You cannot inject the quality at the end of the process, not at all. It's not sufficient. You might fix some biggest fires, but that's not gonna be how quality management should be implemented. So with that, you should have a habit of thinking of how do I manage quality throughout the whole project life cycle, end to end? How do I interact with my requester, my client, my buyer, even before the deal is started? And how do I do it when no one is looking? So this is all topics or ideas, concepts that have to be considered when we're talking about quality. You might say, why is that picture there? It has nothing to do. That is AI's answer to how do you think about quality. I just asked, give me a picture of quality, just kind of abstract picture of quality. Mixtures absolutely everything. And I believe that this is exactly what we have to we need to have in mind, because, well, I saw 9000 is very strict and very generic. In general, ISO standards tend to be very generic because, again, those have to address a big variety of needs coming from the users and from the service providers as well as the requesters. But for us, we are in a translation industry, or most of us, and I think also interpreting or subtitling multimedia, all that has something to do with translation. So we've got actually the luxury of having the author of the translation, of the definition of what a quality translation means among us. Professor Alan Melby sits over there, and this definition was created by him in collaboration with a couple of other experts back in 2012, something like that. So it's nothing new that translation is not just I look at it, I see it, so this transcendent perspective, I love it or I hate it. Translation must bring in many other, or translation quality, hence the quality of our deliverables must consider other perspectives, such as really fit for purpose. So who is the user needs? Does how is the whole delivery produced? What's the end product that we are creating? And of course, there is this crucial element of the translation offering or ensuring complete correspondence and fluency and or faithfulness to the source, and it should not do any harm to anyone. So that's why we talk about the importance of quality standards. So yes, can standards help us? Yes, of course. And even though you might think it's boring, it's costly to go through the certification, compliance to the standards is vital here. In the RFPs received from different buyers, big or small, you would always find a question. Lately, this is what I saw, like, give me information on the standards you are certified for. And it's not only on InfoSec or data protection, it's also about quality. ISO 17100, one of the most frequently requested standard. Clients want to know whether you are certified or at least whether you are compliant. And there has been a big evolution in the approach towards these standards in the recent years. And this is what I would like to mention here in the forthcoming couple of minutes. So, how do we navigate through the standards? It's a little bit of repetition of what we have already heard. We've got requirements, certification standards. Keyword here, I would say it's trust, building trust. There is an overall belief that if you are certified for 17100, for instance, you've got your processes set up in a certain way, and you engage talent that complies with the requirements and that meets the requirements. In the company I've been working for right now, Argos Multilingual, I had the luxury to go through 2 certification standard audits, and I have to tell you, it's really not like nothing nice. For me, it was like very unpleasant situation, being asked to show or to explain all of the details or about how the translators are being qualified, what their backgrounds is, how the interactions are happening with them, what information is being collected about them on a service delivery front, quality of their work, and what do we do with this. However, still, if you have this certification, because the certification can only be run by certified agencies who have to be, again, accredited by internationally recognized bodies, then it means something. You can hardly operate in a life sciences regulatory business, translation business, without ISO 17100, for instance. So it's worth considering where your agency or company would like to go, who your potential buyers are, and then consider, is compliance okay, or do I have to be certified? But that's known thing already. But what's new is that standards are currently looking into the different world. And here the words are completely new for the requester service provider engagement, because the concepts, the keywords, the main mission of the standards is to help, to guide, to offer suggestions, to underline collaboration, to bring in the element of partnership and transparency. Those guidance standards, which have been released earlier this year, and ASTM F2575 was released last October, if I'm not mistaken, all those standards put the relationship between buyer and service provider into forefront, focus on very specific definitions of project specifications, and what's also very new, consider the fit for purpose quality. So quality or perfect quality does not mean error-free quality, not at all. It means quality corresponds to the given use case and to what this use case is discussed or worked out in collaboration between the buyer and the service provider, and the agreements are then codified in the specifications for the project. And it could be about quite big error tolerance if the use case is that the material simply is not high profile and needs to be delivered fast and is just for someone as a help or some less important intra-company material. And what's completely new with those standards is that there are standards either already released or in works, and those focus on how to measure quality, how to evaluate quality. Those standards in general introduce those latest standards, introduce clarity in terminology. Finally, we are going towards the direction that we start understanding each other. We finally will know that quality assurance is not about counting errors and doing the assessment of the translation. Quality assurance is about proving that our processes work. But if we are looking into the quality of a translation, we are evaluating the quality of the translation. And all that is available in standards, including numerous guidances, definitions, unified error typologies, etc. I think, Daniel, you wanted to ask something?
Actually, okay, so actually you already gave a lot of information. The question that I have is, okay, now, but how does this relate to the reality that I see sometimes that more and more customers don't really care about quality because now they have this cool technology they can just quickly generate everything with and say, it's good, and they don't measure. And they bypass the whole supply chain. What would you say to those?
Good question, because of course there is a general belief that AI will resolve our problems. And if you want to learn more, by the way, come and listen to our panel on failing is not an option. So AI in the context of quality management. So with that, yes, this is $1 million question to identify how do we figure out whether AI-generated content can be relied on, in what extent, how to measure it, etc. But again, going back to standards, for instance, this ISO 11669 and also ASTM F2575-23 edition as new standards, they would give you a very detailed guidance how to start talking about client, how to define the project, how to define content parameters, which is like what AI generates to us. It's not only about language, but it's also language like locales or markets, but it's about use cases, it's about the lingua itself, it's about language register, it's about many different aspects that play into this. And this is what should be the discussion topic between a buyer and a service provider. So those standards gives a solid information to everyone, and for the cost of, how much it's? 150, or I've got it over there, Swiss francs. So you can get extensive checklists, extensive enumeration of questions, clarification questions you should be asking yourself as a service provider to be sure that I know everything, I know my client, I know my project, and also you should help the buyer to maneuver through the space in case they don't know. And this standard also inspires buyers to start thinking upfront and gives them a big help in how to determine what their needs actually are.
When I look at the list that you have here of your important standards, there's a one I heard a bit of fuss about, the 5060. What's all the talk about the revolution of quality again about here? What does it say, this standard? Why is it worth looking at it?
5060, I think many of you must have heard about this already because it was released, I think, 2-3 months ago, time flies, earlier this year. And what I personally would say that's amazing about these standards in general is the fact that it's kind of the first publicly released standard on how to do quality evaluation. Okay, that's important, that's good, it standardizes many different things. I personally, I'm super excited and happy about the fact that two super important players in the area of standardization, ISO and ASTM International, started talking together. Again, Professor Alan Melby could tell you stories because he's the brain behind both. And with that, there has been a lot of effort put into how to harmonize terminology. And if you open 5060, and if you go to the collaboration area of ASTM International for the standard practice of analytic evaluation of translation quality system, or if you open the mqm.org web, which is actually the medium used by the work group and committee working on this standard, you would see that, for instance, error typologies are identical. So it's the end of trying to invent something that works for me, reinventing the wheel. Just, I remember working for Moravia, I did the analysis some 6 years ago about error typology that existed in the database, in the LQA database, because as most of the LSPs do it, they just mirror the quality requirements of their standards. We had about 2,000 rows just to name the different error types, because everybody might use a very similar thing, but it was not exactly the same. Maybe the standards do not always call the thing exactly using the same term. For instance, 5060 says main error type. The MQM would refer to dimension, but you will get it quickly because it's like if you read it, you see how similar the definitions are, or almost identical. ISO standard is developed in a different way. The process behind is different. Also, the pool of contributor is much broader. So obviously, if very many people have to reach a consensus, it's difficult, and it end up being more generic and not always exactly what you personally would like to see, but okay, as long as it is kind of in correlation, it works. ISO 5060 gives information about error types. As I said, go to the mqm.org website, you'll see downloadables of error types, score MQM, full MQM, whatever. ISO 5060 also introduces the concept of, again, speaks about fit-for-purpose quality, so use case-driven quality, which would be a presentation or story for itself. And it also talks about sampling, meaning how gives guidance or instructions how to do the sampling. You would find similar information also on the mqm.org website, including all the important terminology as well, because the website serves as our MQM council, council's publication place up until the standard is released. But I wanted to say that both standards will be very important, and ISO 5060 at this moment is really a revolution in terms that finally something the diversity and the disintegration within the users of, or within whoever wanted to measure quality. This is the very important attempt to get it unified and then to publish it for whoever wants. There is also some other differences. If you open 5060, you'd see that the quality evaluation and quality scoring is different. They ISO measures like error rate, which is something what I see many life sciences clients, or error score, which is what many life sciences clients would do, as opposed to calculating the quality score, which is being done under MQM. Check out our latest scoring documents out there. And but still it provides guidance, and it's a big achievement in the with regards to standardization.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the audience related to quality standards, how to put them in practice, or are you just overwhelmed by all the information Katka just gave you?
Okay, full disclosure, I am on ISO Technical Committee 37, Subcommittee 5, Working Group 3, 2, 4, and 11. I just wanted to reiterate what has been said here, that there are actually a total of 34 standards for our industry available between ASTM and ISO. Everybody can purchase them, and I encourage everyone to go shopping and look at the relevant standards and read them. Regardless of whether you choose to get certified, they will help you provide quality services, and you can use it as a marketing tool. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you, Katka. I just want to ask, when you talk about collaboration, partnership, all this stuff, do you refer to this two new release standard, the STM from last year and the new S5060? Okay, that's new to me. It was never mentioned in any quality documents really, other than target audience maybe. But I think it's super close with what we've always seen in ISO 9000, where it's customer centricity, right? And we need to follow the perception of the client. How would you recommend we talk to the clients about quality in this idea of quality being not necessarily 100% error-free? I do have clients that expect us to perform to 100%, and at the same time, probably other that would be good enough with other, but we don't want to tell them it's lower quality. What language do you use to talk about those levels of expected quality?
Excellent question. Excellent question. It's very challenging. I understand, because it's a discussion we all are exposed to more and more frequently, because it's it's related to the massive content enablement through NMT and lately through Gen AI. Now, it's on one hand we have to consider several perspectives, and that's exactly how I always start my discussions with the client. So quality has got like several dimensions. It's 5 dimensions. I intentionally did not include it into this one, but together with Jennifer, who maybe is not in the room anymore, Jennifer Balido, PhD, we delivered numerous webinars to Gala and also Gala Academy on Quality Management, where we explained that quality is not only about this transcendent perfect perspective, but it also, so it means you definitely have scenarios in which the error tolerance is 0 or almost equal to 0. It is in regulatory industries where it really is important to understand which is the problems that are absolutely prohibited and that must not be detected. I've been working with a client lately who just explained to me how difficult it is and how overkilling it is for them if they see that in a ex post audit there is a mention of one serious error. So it is about the discussion what a serious error really means, clarification of what do you mean by this one exactly, because very often the misconception comes from the fact that we are linguists and we understand serious errors as a breach of grammatical rules, for instance. However, for the client in the life sciences industry, serious error is something that has fatal consequences. That's the difference. So we always need to talk about the perspective. In quality pyramid, it would be kind of the product perspective. So what are the risks related to the product? And risk assessment and risk management is a thing that has been introduced by ISO 11669 as well. There is a huge paragraph on this one. Then, of course, it closely relates to workflows, processes, and quality. But we never should forget about buyer's responsibility or this buyer's perspective, which is their budget. Their, how much they are going to invest. So clients would typically expect top quality, but if you go into their budget and if you go in that direction, you see that those elements are very contradictory. So the discussions about like what to expect and what's tolerated go back to the definition of what a good translation quality is, where all of those perspectives are embedded, and then you need to be receptive to like what your client needs are. Those may not be explicit. You have to figure out how to maneuver through the discussion space.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if we've got more time because it's already 5 past and I think the time is over. I would suggest summing up this conversation about the standards. Also, the last comments that Katka made, there are great opportunities now because if the client doesn't know what they want, which I as a consultant also see very often, it's very good for all of you because you know how you can get the client to define the level of quality that they want to achieve. And I think this is something that's going to be more and more important also in the future